Kelly Davis, your host of the Untold Miracles podcast, and today I am so excited. I'm talking to a motivational speaker, author, war veteran, military hero, fitness guru, dedicated father, and I'm sure I've left a few things out. Mr. Noah Galloway, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
It is truly an honor for me to be talking to you. We have a mutual friend, Lewis Howes, and I saw you on Dancing with the Stars, and I listened to you on his podcast, and I'm just so excited for listeners to hear your story. On this podcast, we talk about miracles, and I feel like your life is the definition of a miracle. And I want you to take us back to December 19th, 2005.
Yeah, so it was my second deployment to Iraq, and I was driving a Humvee, and it was at nighttime, so I had my night vision goggles on, but with night vision goggles, you can see well, but you can't see everything. And I didn't see a tripwire that was stretched across the road that detonated a roadside bomb. And it hit my door through the vehicle into the water. And because of that, I woke up 6 days later in a hospital, unaware of what had happened. And, was told by my mom, who was at my bedside, that I'd lost my left arm above the elbow, my left leg above the knee. My right leg was severely injured. My right arm had some injuries to it. My jaw was shattered, so my mouth was wired shut. And it was a lot to take in, because it was like overnight, my entire world was flipped upside down.
So in that moment, how do you process what's going on?
Looking back, I don't think there was any way possible that I was processing anything. It was one emotion after another. I was just up and down. With 1 minute, I was like, this will be okay. The next minute, I was mad. And another minute, I was crying like a baby. I didn't know where I was. I was terrified. I was scared. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And, it took me a while to really grasp what was going on with my injuries. And not only that, dealing with the loss of a career. I loved my job being in the military, and all that, all the goals and ambitions I had in the military were just taken away.
After rehabilitation, I know that you struggled with something that many veterans do. You became withdrawn, out of shape, depressed, drinking, smoking, sleeping your days away. What was your belief about yourself at that point?
I think that the depression that I suffered from, we could compare it to a lot of veterans, but it's not uncommon with anybody of any profession. You have a job and you have a desire to achieve certain goals. You have a purpose. And then suddenly that future that you envision is gone and you're lost. You don't know where you are, where you're going to go, what the next step is, what you're capable of doing. And that was terrifying and just put me in a deep, dark depression. And I got off the medication, but I was self-medicating and just not taking care of myself. And I was, all I could really explain is I was somebody that I would not spend any time with today. I was not a good person.
Well, I know that there was a transformation for you. It was one specific night. I would love for you to tell us what happened when you looked in the mirror and realized that there was more to him than just your injuries.
There was that moment, but it wasn't just one night everything turned around. That was an important moment in my life, where I was looking in the mirror, and every time I looked in the mirror, I had this full-length mirror in my bedroom, and all I saw were my injuries. I saw that my arm was gone, my leg was gone. And then one night I was looking, and I noticed how out of shape I'd gotten. And I've always been into fitness, and I was like, wow, what am I doing? And then I had this moment of realizing I needed to quit concentrating on what I'd lost and concentrate on what I had left. And then I had this moment of where I walked out in the living room, and my 3 children were sitting on the couch, and I realized to my 2 boys, I was showing them what a man is, and that's what they're going to become one day. And to my little girl, I was showing her how a man's supposed to act, and that's what she was going to look for. And that thought terrified me. And so I knew I needed to make a change. Now, I always tell people it wasn't like that moment happened and I was just better. No, I still messed up. I still made mistakes. But every time I would screw up and fall flat on my face, it was the motivation of my children that got me up and going and pushing a little bit harder each time, getting a little bit more, getting help with depression, all the different things, get back into fitness and just become a better father. That became my ultimate goal, just to be a good father to my children.
Well, speaking of fathers, your father had an accident when he was young, correct? And he lost his hand. Mm-hmm. How did that impact you as you watched what he went through? And then what kind of example was he to you when you had to go through it yourself?
Well, I mean, when he was injured, it was before I was born. I've only known him with one hand. But as a man with one hand, he's done construction my entire life. He's taught me how to roof houses, do room additions, plumbing. He did it all with one hand. And it was almost not even that big of a deal to us, his children, because it's all we knew. And to be injured, I remember in the hospital, I had a doctor ask me if I did things with one hand because my dad did. And I was like, no, that's a ridiculous question. Why would I? But now I have 3 children, and I see them do things with one hand because I do things with one hand. Their grandfather does things with one hand. And what I really noticed immediately was I adapted much faster to doing things with one hand while I was in the hospital than the other men and women that were there that were injured. And I think that was because of my father. And then he was able to talk to me about these different struggles. Now, he gave me a lot of great advice and told me what I was going to experience. But at the end of the day, I'm hard-headed. And I was like, you went through that. I'm not. And that depression hit me really hard because I was just convinced I was not going to go through what he did. And I went through exactly what he told me I was going to go through.
I'd like you to tell us the biggest miracle worker in your life.
The biggest miracle worker in my life, I would have to say it's not just one. I have 3 sisters that are incredible. They're hard workers. They're passionate about what they do. My oldest sister has her PhD in childhood education. She still works with younger children, but she also works with those aspiring to be teachers, in a course at a university. And she's passionate about education and the care for children. My youngest sister teaches special ed. She works with, I love to go to the classrooms and do things with students. And I love to do things with, special ed classes. But at the end of the day, I visit and I leave. My sister is there day in and day out. And that takes an incredible person with a lot of love, a lot of passion to do what she does. And then I have my sister, Sarah, that, yes, she's not in education. She works for a department store that she started working at 17 as a cashier. And now she is over 19 of those stores. She is very high up in management. And what is impressive about her is she relates well to those at the bottom because that's where she started. And she's not just some hired head that came in. She works with them and she'll stock shelves with them. And she's able to work with them and help them get in whatever direction they want. If they go from there to somewhere else, or if they want to aspire in that company to move forward. And between my 3 sisters and what they do and the care and love they have for others and supporting, I mean, that's the biggest miracle that I have in my life, that I aspire to be better as a person because of what they do.
I love that, talking about family and the love that you have for each other. At Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, we treat 10 million kids each year at 170 children's hospitals, and the family is all affected by the child. I'd like you to give us some advice for family members to be able to support someone who's going through a very difficult time, whether it's an amputation, whether it's cancer, whatever it is.
It was without a doubt family. I tell people all the time, the success that I had recovering from my injury was due to my family, my parents, my 3 sisters. That strong family support makes a difference. My oldest son, Colston, spent 3 months at Children's Hospital in Nashville, and it was really hard. It was right when he was born, and between my family and his mother's family coming to support us and being there, and those around us, friends and family, showed nothing but support. The military I was in the military. It was between deployments when all that happened. Sometimes as a family member, whatever it is, you're not expected to be the doctor or the therapist or whatever is needed, but just knowing, as whether you're a patient or as when I was the parent, of a child that was in children's hospital, just knowing that love and support is there sometimes gets you through the darkest moments.
So was he treated at our hospital at Vanderbilt?
He was.
In Nashville?
Yes.
And tell me, was he a preemie or what happened?
He was early enough that his mother got up in the middle of the night because she was restless. She was afraid she was going to wake me up. And then while I was at work, she called me and she said, I think I need to go to the doctor. She thought she was having Braxton Hicks contractions. Mm-hmm. We got there. The nurses are kind of taking their time, and then they checked her. This is the first time I'd never seen a child born or anything. And they said, they started rushing. I was like, what's going on? They're like, she's 10 centimeters. I was like, what does that mean? They're like, this baby's coming. And so, or it was 5 centimeters. I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong one. It was whatever it is. I'm not a doctor. They tried to stop Colston from coming. They started pumping with magnesium. And then after about 14 hours, they said, look, we are not prepared for a premature birth. So they sent us to another hospital. They started pumping with steroids, hoping the lungs would form. And then he was born in Kentucky. And then there was a problem with his intestines, and they rushed us from there to Nashville. And they thought it was going to be easy. They thought a part of his intestines died out. They were going to go in and remove it. And turned out 75% of his small intestine had twisted up. And before they had surgery, they had all died out. So he lost all of that. And then he had a central line and a stomach tube. And when we finally left Children's Hospital, we had all that equipment. You know, we had a backpack for the central line. We had the machine for the stomach tube. And for months, that's what we dealt with. And it was hard. I remember his mother, the first time that the nurse came to the house to set everything up, when she left, Colston's mom just broke down. And I told her, we're going to get through this. And she was incredible with how she did with Colston. It was a lot of work that we put into, but now he's 13 years old and you'd never know there was anything wrong with him.
Wow. I'm really sorry that your family went through that, but I'm so grateful that that hospital was there to support you in your time of crisis. And I'm so happy that he's doing great today. I do want to talk to you about your experience on the 20th season of Dancing with the Stars. I remember watching you, Noah, and I would turn the TV on and literally like your amputation is above the elbow, right?
Yes. So I don't have an elbow or a knee. Those joints are gone.
On the right side, correct?
Left side.
Left side. And you would go out and dance with Sharna, and it was if it was just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it makes me want to cry because you just knew in that moment, like if you could do it, anyone can handle any challenge that they're going through. Because, I mean, has there ever been an amputee on the show before? There
have, but none of them. When they called me and asked me to do it, and I kept mentioning my leg, they said, yeah, we've had leg amputees, but we want you because you're missing your arm. I said, no, you've had amputees that were missing their feet. I don't have a knee. Right. And then there was silence on the phone. They didn't think about that. But once I said it, they were like, oh, this will be different. And I remember about week 2 or 3, one of the judges, maybe like Carrie Ann, said that Sharna and I's bond that we had already formed in a short time is usually something you don't see in the partners until later in the season. And I think it was because of what we had to overcome in the rehearsal studios day in and day out. And when they asked me to do the show, I'd never seen Dancing with the Stars before. I told them I'd heard of it. I had no dance experience at all. And I went into it not thinking I'd last long and didn't really, I wasn't that worried about it. I turned down 2 other shows, Surviving another show. And when Dancing with the Stars called, I gave them the same reason that I wouldn't do it because I didn't want to leave Alabama because I'm close to my kids. Mm-hmm. And Sharna actually came to Birmingham. They said, you know what, we'll send your dancer to you if you'll do it. So I was like, all right. So we rehearsed in Birmingham and flew back and forth for the live show. But it wasn't until halfway through the season that I started having a lot of not just people with disabilities, but veterans, people without disabilities that were just feeling motivated. I mean, the audience was reaching out to me and just constantly telling me how inspirational I was. And it became very motivating for me to push as hard as I could. You know, I was not the best dancer on the show, but I do feel like I showed that I was working really hard every week to do the best I could do.
Well, yeah, you made it to third runner-up. And
Yeah.
what was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
That I do not like dance. What was interesting was towards the end of the season, I had some friends of mine comment that my gait and movement on my prosthetic leg was smoother.
Oh, no.
Because of what Sharna was working with me, I was getting more comfortable on that prosthetic leg. And so it helped with my overall daily movement, and which also transitions into with the races I do, with my workouts. I'm always strict on my form in the gym and when I'm training, but that just gave me a little more confidence on the prosthetic leg. And so that was an interesting thing. And though when I say not liking dance, now that means I don't like to dance, but I have a stronger appreciation for the art of dance. Like I remember just standing one day and watching a couple of the couples as we were rehearsing, and I could see the story being told. And I knew that dance was an art form, but I never took the time to watch it and appreciate it. And that experience gave me a whole new appreciation for the art of dance.
Well, I think it's so interesting that you don't like something that you're very talented at. But I guess that's the case with a lot of people. They have talents in areas. It's so funny you don't like it and you're so good at it. It's amazing.
No, people say that. I don't think so. I can't watch my dances, and I've not danced a step since the show ended.
Oh, my goodness. So I want to talk about dreaming big. I want to know what your dreams were when you were a little boy. And did you ever dream of being on the cover of Men's Health magazine?
I actually did. As a young kid, I wanted to be Superman. Plain and simple. He was the ultimate superhero. He stood for truth, justice, the American way. That was it. As I got into fitness and as a teenager and in my early 20s in the military, before my injury, I would always say that I want to be on the cover of Men's Health.
Oh, my gosh.
And when I made the cover of Men's Health, a lot of people that I have not talked to in years reached out to me and said, wow, you always said you were going to be on the cover of Men's Health. That was my goal. That's what I wanted.
You're the first ever amputee and war veteran, correct, to be on the cover?
Yes. And that's the world's largest men's magazine.
Well, I want you to speak to us about fitness. You're a fitness expert. Tell me what your goals are.
My goals, I've gone through different transitions in life of what I'm doing, how I'm training. When I was doing a lot of races, after my injury, I was adjusting my workouts to that. And then I got busy after Dancing with the Stars. I travel a lot. So it kind of backed off, but now I'm getting back. And so then I was really maintaining. I was keeping a healthy lifestyle, but was not pushing it to the next level. And here recently I've gotten back into that world of wanting to get back out and race more. I ran a marathon, back in doing a marathon. I did one in January in Maui, and I've got a Tough Mudder coming up. I'm doing in LA. So I'm not going to go overboard with it. I did have a time before all this attention came that I was overdoing it, and my body took a toll. The body is not designed to do obstacles and run all these races with one arm and one leg. People do them, but it takes its toll. And I'm getting back into being cautious. I'm getting older, and I have to think about where I'm going to be in 10, 15, 20 years, and with my injuries. So I don't want to overdo it. So I'm kind of hit that middle ground between doing all the races and not doing races, and just kind of do a little bit and get back into I like that adventure, that challenge.
Tell me about your most memorable race and why.
The most memorable race I did wasn't a race that I ran. Out in White Sands, New Mexico, they have the Bataan Memorial Death March. The Bataan Death March is, the memorial is in honor of a march that some American soldiers were captured and forced to walk for miles and miles, and a lot of them died. And so this was started up out there, and a lot of military go and do it. You can run it as a marathon because it is 26.2 miles, but a lot of people go out there and you can walk. A lot of people walk it without a pack, or you walk it with a pack, and if you want to be qualified at the end, you have to weigh it. It has to be at least 35 pounds. And we did it together, me and a group of veterans, with 50 to 55 pounds on our back, and we did it in gas masks. So the gas mask was raising attention and awareness for injured veterans that were out there doing it for. I was the only injured veteran in the group, and the gas mask cuts off 20% of your oxygen. So we're out there, and I hit this moment halfway through where I thought, I'm not going to be able to finish. Like, my body is shutting down. But I thought, you know what, I'll just keep walking until I pass out, which to some people was like, well, that sounds crazy. But I was like, I'm just going to keep walking. But I never passed out. And it just, like, the feeling felt worse and worse and worse. And then we got to the finish line, and then we unmasked, and all these people wanted to meet us. And it was this great feeling. But then when we got to our car, I got sick and thought I just needed an IV. And paramedics came, and they were checking me out. And I was like, well, I just want an IV. I don't want to go to the hospital. And they said, we can't force you to go. But then they said, the doctor wants you to come in. And in the ambulance, they showed me on the EKG that, according to the EKG, I was having a heart attack. And they started running tests on me. And late that night, a doctor came in and told me that my entire body was shutting down. That's what happened to me. And I said, with a smile on my face, that's good, because I finished. And she did not think it was funny. She said, no, you could have died. But in my mind, you always wonder if you have what it takes to push your limits. And I didn't know after my injury if I still had that. And that was that moment that told me that I still have which isn't always the healthiest thing. I don't want anybody to hear this to think, oh, I got to push to that limit. No, but as a soldier, I know that you always want to know you would go above and beyond. And that was one of those moments that told me that I still had that mental fortitude to go a little further. Of course, I just mentioned that I'm being more cautious in my races, but that's an event that sticks out in my mind that just told me, hey, you still got it. And that's all I needed to know, was that I still had it.
I know in your motivational speaking, you talk about adversity and goal setting and facing your fears. And that story is a complete example of some of the things you talk about. But you also talk about living life to the fullest. Would you mind sharing a story around that can help listeners?
When you hear living life to the fullest, that isn't, I don't want people to think that means we should all be out skydiving and doing things that some people just won't enjoy doing. But you should never pass up an opportunity that might make life more enjoyable for you. I feel like too many people overlook the fact that, whether you're a religious person or you're not, this is the only time we have on this earth. Even if you believe there's something after, or if you think there's nothing after, both groups need to look at it and realize this is the only time we have on this earth in this body. And you got to take advantage of what we have here. Make sure that we're living, because when I think about my kids, I don't want them to miss out on any opportunities. And children don't go by what we tell them; they go by what they see. And if Dad's not living life to the fullest, if I'm making excuses not to do things that might better my own life, well, my kids will have excuses as well. And I feel like we have to be pushing ourselves, in whatever aspect, whether it's physical or mental. I know I've met people that in their 30s, 40s, whatever, they're like, I'd like to go back to school, but I'm just too, who cares? Go. What reason do you have not to? I'm sure you can come up with reasons, but are they really justifiable? And that's why I feel like we need to live life to the fullest, because to not ever be held back on happiness. We all deserve it.
Well, have you thought about what your life might be like if you didn't make the decision to be on Dancing with the Stars? And because that was an opportunity to live full out.
It was. And I am thankful I did it, because my story reached an audience that never would have heard it. It's been great. I still get the attention. I love attention. I've always been that way. I've always liked to be the center of attention, so it's perfect. But I don't think, life would be different, but what's most important to me, I mentioned briefly that I turned down Survivor and another show and told Dancing with the Stars no, but they accommodated because my children take priority. And I still turn things down for my kids. And if you were to ask me right now where I see myself in 5 years, would I love to still be in the public eye? Yes, I'd love that. But I also know that things change in life, and I may not be. But what I do hope is that in 5 years, I am still striving to be the best father I can be to my children and setting the best example I can for my children. And, wherever that is, if that's in the public eye or if it's not, if I hadn't been on Dancing with the Stars, I'd hope that right now, even if I weren't on your podcast, no one knew who I was, didn't want to interview me, I would still be doing whatever it is to set the best example for my children.
One way that you're setting an example is through the No Excuses Charitable Fund that you've set up to benefit charities that you're very passionate about. Tell us more about that.
Well, after I was injured, as an injured veteran, I dealt with a lot of different organizations that work with veterans, and a lot of them are great, but I did see the ones that were benefiting off of veterans. They weren't doing any good for the veterans. They were just making money, and that bothered me. And then when I got the opportunity to set something up, I decided to choose it in a way that it's not like I don't have a charity. I have a charitable fund. I have a third party that runs it. No money ever goes through my hand. I just decide where it goes. And I chose organizations like Operation Enduring Warrior. They're the ones that I went and did that Bataan Memorial Death March with.
The one where you almost killed yourself.
Yeah, that's probably not the best example. That was on me. But they take veterans out and they run races, and you get that camaraderie, you get that sense of adventure, and it does wonders for these guys as they're newly injured to go and do things and realize that they are capable of doing more than they thought they could, even with their injuries. And I love what they do with veterans. Another one is Homes for Our Troops. They build houses, accessible houses for injured veterans. And 90 cents on every dollar goes to the veteran. That's almost unheard of in the nonprofit world. And the third one is the YMCA. I'm part of the YMCA. My children do the sports of the YMCA, and the YMCA is all about family. And I don't know if you picked up on just hearing me talk right now. I'm big on family. And that means a lot to me because, I work out at the Y, but also I'm involved in other programs there, and I love what they're doing. So I make sure that a portion of the money goes to the YMCA as well. So I'm all about, because I do think it kind of goes full circle, with the sports. My kids do sports at the Y. I got into fitness at a young age. Fitness was a big part of coming out of my depression. I got back into fitness, started taking care of myself. I would run races and I'm still involved with Operation Enduring Warrior. Well, that's a part of the puzzle. But then, you see a guy like me out on the race course going at it, and you're like, wow, this guy's doing all this missing arm and leg. What you don't see is after the race, my body has taken a beating. Sometimes my residual limb on my leg is sore, and I got to take it off for a day or two, or my right ankle is swollen, my knee's bad, and getting around the house isn't easy. So when you go home, it should be a home. That's where your safety is. If people think you're a Superman out in public, well, you got to have somewhere you take that cape off, and to have a home that is adaptive and accessible with an injury is necessary. So I feel like my charitable fund is one big circle, from start to finish, and what is necessary, and making sure that lives are being fulfilled and that the happiness is achieved.
I want to know what the hardest thing is from being an amputee that people might not understand or know.
There's several actually.
Well, because one of my best friends is an amputee. He doesn't have his left leg from the socket. He lost it to cancer when he was 10. He's 30 now, but he's gone on to be motivational speaker, author, Paralympian, YouTuber. And one of the things he told me that's really hard for him, he got married recently. He can't help out. Like if they were to move, he can't lift anything. Like he just can't help the way he wants to.
And for me, I was 24 when I got injured. And anytime any of my sisters moved, I was the one they called. And then suddenly I always joked and said I stepped back into the management position. Now I just boss people around. But it does. It affects. Even when you're physically fit and you're able to do things on the, running races or working out, there are little small movements that become difficult and not as easy. But one thing that I always point out to people is, say you're an amputee, you're missing your leg, and you've been out of shape, and you decide one day, you know what, I'm going to get back into shape. Well, you don't just jump up and start jogging or anything. It takes, not only does it takes change in your residual limb, it takes change in your socket. You have to go get a different leg if you want to start running. Mm-hmm. If you start losing weight, it has to be adjusted. If you put on weight, it has to be adjusted. So there's all these small changes that go into a leg, just walking and especially running, that has to be adjusted and tinkered with. And, if my running leg that I run in and run races in broke today, well, then I'd have to get a new one. I'd have to wait for the order to get in. I have to wait for it to be delivered. Then we have to put it together and then time all that back in again. And that can be very frustrating. So it's the fact that, you can't just jump up and do anything. There's all this, the technology is incredible, but with technology, there's change, and it can be very difficult sometimes.
So what is the biggest challenge for you with being an amputee?
It's dealing with the prosthetics.
Okay. Because my friend can't even wear one. It's way too painful. And people would think, well, why don't you just wear one? It's not possible.
It can. I can get a sore on the bottom of my stump on my leg that can affect me even wearing one. And that's, and the same thing with your friend. I guarantee he's like, oh, I'd love to wear one, but if it's not fitting right, if it's not comfortable, then it just doesn't happen. So prosthetics are a godsend that, with technology and the people that are creating them is amazing, but it never compares to the real thing. It never will.
Well, tell us about Eric Eisenberg. I know he fits prosthetic devices. How has he helped you?
Eric, not only being my prosthetist that you work close with to make sure that my leg that I walk in every day is working right, that my running leg is working right. He, from the beginning, saw something in me that I didn't see yet. I told you that I went through depression in the beginning. He saw that I had capabilities of doing more. And he was the one that pushed me he was one of the people that really pushed me to get back into fitness. One of the first gyms I joined after my injury, he paid for the membership. He didn't have to do that. That was out of his own money, his own pocket. Wow. And he saw something in me. And I am very thankful for that, because that was one of the multiple things that helped get me going and get me to where I am today. So Eric's not just making sure my limbs work. He has helped me as a person.
What piece of advice would you offer to someone who is really, really struggling, whether they're a recent amputee, they're going through an illness? What advice do you wish that you would have received when it happened to you that you can share now?
I'm going to say something that is going to sound like the corniest thing, and we've all heard it, but there's a reason we've all heard it. But tomorrow is a new day, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I hate to say things like that, but if it's real, it's real. It's like, so I tell people all the time that, whatever it is, people are always trying to think outside the box, but we too often forget that most of the answers are in the box. So there's no need to wander off. And something as simple as there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There is. And no matter what horrible place you're in, you will get through it. And that, because I did it. I've seen others do it. There's so many stories of those that have been through it, but it does get better. And the best thing, this sounds crazy, the best thing about hitting rock bottom is it makes you stronger, and it gives you a goal to aspire and build towards. Because, you hear all the time people that make it to the top of life and success, and they're lonely and there's nothing. But when you hit rock bottom, you've got nothing but up. And that is it really carves out who you are. If it weren't for my depression, if it weren't for my injury, I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't have the relationship I have with my kids if it weren't for the struggles I went through. So I am thankful for those hard times.
Oh, thank you. Well, we close the podcast with this question. If there were 3 miracles that you could create in the world today, what would that be for you?
Man, and 3, that's a tough number to come up with. We mentioned Children's Hospital, and I do, like, Alabama, Birmingham has one of the 10th,
that's our hospital as well,
largest,
and it's amazing.
Yeah, 10th in the country with Children's Hospital, and I do a lot there, visiting kids when people I know find out that I go to children's a lot, or during Dance with the Stars, I actually flew out a lot of different kids and their families to be in the audience. And one friend of mine, Quinn, that I met at Children's Hospital in Birmingham when he was 14, now he's 16, lost his leg to cancer. And then they found out it was in his lungs. So, I still visit him when he comes in town. But I flew him and his mom out for the finale of Dancing with the Stars. And it wasn't anything I posted or talked about. It wasn't about that. It was just doing it. And I think when friends of mine hear that, they think, oh, that is so sweet you do that. I don't think it's that sweet. It's what we should all be doing. And I think that a miracle I'd like to see is more people doing more for our youth, for children, whether it's those that are in the hospital or being more aware of what's going on with our youth in general, paying attention, spotting depression, or a child who is in an unhealthy household. There's all these cues and signs. Growing up with, two of my sisters being educators, I've learned from them those different cues and signs. And I think that we should all be wanting to know those things and working with our own children and other children, because that's our future. If we want to see anything improve or whatever with the future, what's right in front of us. My 3 children, I'm not just trying to be a good dad. I'm doing something for our future. I want 3 kids that grow up to be adults that are doing positive things in the world. And we can all be part of that future, but it means us getting more involved with the youth. And that's a miracle I would like to see happen. That's one. A second one, I can't help but think of the school shootings that we've had. And I think it would be foolish of us when I hear people say the world today. It takes one history book to know that, look, there's a lot in history that has been negative. There will always be negativity, and there will always be happiness, and it's all in what you see. But there's also trends in what happens, and there is a trend in these school shootings. And I think that there can be a conversation in figuring out what we can do to prevent it. But what gets in the way, and this is not getting on a political stance, what gets in the way is politics and people on 2 sides arguing when they both, if you really sit down and think about it, are coming from a good place. Neither side wants to see these tragedies happen, but they're not coming together and meeting in the middle and saying, okay, this is what I like to see improve, and the other side, this is what I want to see improve, and see what we can do together and talk with these children and making sure these families are aware of things to look for. And that goes back to the first thing that I said in communicating with our children. I'm not saying that communication is going to solve everything, but we need to start communicating with our children and with each other in a better way. So that's another thing I'd like to see.
That is a pretty big miracle you are asking for. I like it. It would take a miracle.
Yes, it would.
For us to find the middle ground. And that's what we need.
I know. And it's like, I get so aggravated. Like, I have 2 friends of mine that I'm really close to. They're very highly educated. One's a social worker. One's a doctor. One's, very conservative. The other one is very liberal. And we can sit around and talk for hours. No one ever gets upset. I have heard several times one person say, I never thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense. And it's like, if more people, when we put in small groups, we're capable of doing it. It's when we're getting to the masses that we get skewed and we get bothered by things that we shouldn't, and then start assuming, and we start, putting people in categories and assuming. And that's where everything gets skewed. And I think that people need to start being a little more understanding of, and putting ourselves in other shoes to see where people are coming from.
And your third miracle?
That's only 2. The third one, I would really like to be able to eat all the fried chicken I'd like and it not affect my diet or the way I look.
How amazing would that be? That would be the best miracle.
I feel like if we could get the first 2 miracles to happen, the world would be a better place, and all that is left is to be able to eat, junk food and fried chicken and it not affect us. And I think if we had all those things come together, we would all be much happier.
Well, Noah, before I close out, I do want you to tell our listeners where they can follow you.
Well, I mean, I have my website, noahgalloway.com. It has, I know a lot of people reach out to me for different things, for speaking engagements. There's a tab for that. But also from the website, or if you just go to social media, I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Noah Galloway, they're certified accounts. Twitter is at Noah_Galloway. And, you know, I love to post things of what I'm doing and what my kids are doing and interacting with those that follow me. And yeah, I am all over social media and my website.
Well, thank you so much, Noah. I want to acknowledge you and thank you, first of all, for being an amazing human being and an incredible father to Colston, Jack, and Ryan. They are so lucky to have you as a dad. And then I want to thank you so much for the good that you create in the world. You didn't let your struggle stop you. It became your strength. Your pain became your purpose. You truly are living your life full out and inspiring everyone around you. And I look forward to doing more together. I didn't know that you had a miracle baby yourself, and I'd love to get you inside some of our children's hospitals. We have 170 across the country, and I just think there's a lot more that we can do together. And I'm just blessed and honored to have had this time with you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Untold Miracles. We're so grateful to have your support, and we would love it if you could go to iTunes and leave a review. If you have any questions, comments, ideas of special guests you'd like to see on the podcast, please email me at kdavis@cmnhospitals.org. And if you'd like to make a miracle in the life of a sick kid, go to cmnhospitals.org and donate. Thanks again for your support of the Untold Miracles podcast.